On this edition of Sightings, a millionaire's murder confounds the police.
The beating itself was a particularly savage beating.
Now, psychic Dorothy Allison uncovers new leads.
Getting the killers, I love it.
Are excavations already underway on what many believe is the lost continent of Atlantis?
This is a story that is real.
Among the many spirits encountered at this antebellum mansion is a mysterious lady in white.
Now you're going to ask me if I believe in ghosts. Yes, I believe in them because I've seen one.
The mysterious power of ley lines. Can these energy force fields lead us to a better life?
It's not a clairvoyant sort of psychic thing. It's actually physically felt in your body.
And the many means of seeing into the future.
When you're forewarned, you can be forearmed.
Welcome to Sightings. I'm Tim White. Psychic detective Dorothy Allison loves to get a killer. And when she heard about the murder of Morris Lack, she was more determined than ever. Morris Lack survived the Nazi Holocaust. He lived on after nearly everyone he knew was exterminated. He moved to Canada, worked hard, built a personal fortune, and then just as he was about to start enjoying the good life, someone else decided it was time for the survivor to die.
This is where he went after he committed the murder. He took the money to make it really look good, but he hated Mr. Lack. This is how he goes home. Now, only that killer knows that. And me.
The psychic impressions tumble out, clue upon clue that she believes will lead to a coward and a killer. In her 40-year career, Dorothy Allison has provided leads in over 1,000 unsolved crimes. At the request of police detectives in Ontario, Canada, Dorothy has agreed to put all of her psychic energy into the area's most baffling murder.
And I had to say to myself, why am I doing this? It's such terrible work. But no one says that to a cop. I'm doing the same thing he's doing. So you just take it in your stride and say to yourself, hey, I have to find out who did that. And that's the satisfaction I get, getting the killers. I love it.
This is the victim, Morris Lack, as a young man, a Holocaust survivor, a self-made millionaire, a murder victim.
It was a Friday evening. I remember he had sent me to the bank to get him some money. I gave it to him, and I told him that I would see him tomorrow at his birthday party. And I never did.
Another man might have stayed home on his 72nd birthday. But Morris Lack went to his scrap business. The family knew his routine, so when they couldn't reach him, panic set in.
My mother called me and said that she was concerned about my father. So I drove down the mountain. Then when I came around to the corner on Burlington Street, I saw the police yellow ribbons.
It was early, 6:30 a.m., December 19th, 1992, when police found him. Morris Lack had died on the same day he was born.
The beating itself was a particularly savage beating. There were 5 to 8 blows to the head area only.
News of these senseless and brutal murders sent shockwaves through Hamilton, Ontario.
He was strong, he was vibrant, and he was raising millions of dollars for the state of Israel. Some fool had the life of such a man in his hand, and he decided to take it.
It was a shock to me. It was a shock to many people who knew him in the community. As a man of a simple but not negotiable attitudes.
While being 72 years old, he was hardly a shrinking violet. He was a hale and hearty man.
He survived the Nazi death camps, came to Canada, made a fortune, and then started to share what he'd made.
This is a man who walked off a boat with no money, through his own sheer will, ended up a multimillionaire, was greeted in the halls of Israel by the top politicians.
When police found Morris Lack's body, money had been stolen, and so his death was considered the result of a botched robbery. But his family and co-workers are not so sure.
This was a man that controlled substantial amounts of money and substantial amounts of materials. And I believe that it was a conspiracy. I believe that it had something to do with the scrap industry.
But after a 4-year investigation, police still don't know if this was a robbery or something more. So now it's Dorothy Allison's turn to see with her mind's eye what really happened at the scene of the crime.
When they first called me and said, we have a murder case and we're having a little problem with it. We can't seem to find out who killed this person. Then pictures start coming in. Then I say to myself, well, this is where I must look today.
On site, Dorothy begins with a psychic survey of the crime scene photos. It's the most gruesome, but also the most productive part of her investigation.
As I look at your pictures here, Reed Street becomes very important as I look at these pictures.
Unaware of the family's suspicions, Dorothy also senses that this was more than a random robbery.
I do get the feeling that the suspect has something to do with this building that he was killed in front of. In other words, he either did some work in that building.
And that the killer knew how to get inside the locked building.
He also used the men's room. I believe on the day of the murder.
After she examines the photos, Dorothy asks to touch the murder weapon to sense the story it has to tell.
When he confronted him, it was about money, but not the money that was in his pocket. It was other money that he was interested in.
Then detectives take Dorothy to the scene of the crime. There, she is guided by a persistent vision.
Now, you know, we have to find some kind of a plumbing thing, like a toilet or a toilet seat.
Okay.
Dorothy finds what she's looking for in one of the older warehouses on the south side of the property.
Yeah, that's bothering me more than anything is the bathroom.
Dorothy has a very strong sense that the killer must have known this business very well because he had figured out how to get in and work his way around the property without tripping any of the silent alarms.
That hole in the fence? I did not know
that bothered me like crazy.
Isn't that eerie?
There are things that she has pointed out that I had forgotten about. I had forgotten they existed, and when I walked back in there, they were exactly as she described it.
In this forgotten building, Dorothy suddenly becomes very quiet. She has a chilling realization. The killer has returned to the scene of the crime.
Frank, I don't want to scare her, but he's been in here since the murder.
Moments later, Dorothy finds the piece of plumbing from her earliest psychic vision.
There it is.
Toilet bowl, she mentioned the toilet bowl.
It was in this room, absolutely.
Dorothy is sure now. Morris Lax was murdered by someone who knew him and his business. The psychic images are unwavering. Dorothy is ready to go looking for the killer or where he hid out after the crime.
Any place that you would consider underground where cars go.
She also senses a sign with the word red in it.
This is the Red Hill Express.
Then we're going in the right direction.
Just beyond the sign is Reed Street, one of the first names she'd given back at the police station.
I do see the numbers 93096.
What do the numbers mean?
Whoa. I feel very warm in this place. That's a good sign.
From a red sign to Reed Street to an underground garage, Dorothy finds her numbers.
90.
That's as close as we're going to get to 90.
Yeah.
The garage and the apartments above it are new directions for the police to investigate. It's a promising new lead, especially in light of Dorothy's revelations about the nature of the crime and the killer's motive. And now, Ontario homicide detectives also have a new picture to consider, a sketch of the face only Dorothy sees.
Straight, sloppy hair.
The acuteness and the pinpoint accuracy with which Dorothy was able to bring the suspect to the crime scene, it gives me a great hope that we're heading in the right direction.
I'm almost embarrassed to say it's not about justice. It's not about any of those things. I want the person who did this to pay for it. It's as simple as that.
I want to give every effort and every chance that I can give myself and the police to find this person. He did a terrible thing. He should be caught.
While a renewed homicide investigation begins to follow up on Dorothy's clues, the case remains unsolved. The family is offering a $50,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of Morris Lax's killer. If you have any information, contact the Hamilton, Ontario Police Department.
Next.
There's a great myth memory that haunts mankind of a lost civilization.
Is Atlantis the missing link in the history of our world?
Atlantis, the exquisite mythical city that sank beneath the waves 12,000 years ago. The legend sparks everyone's imagination sooner or later. Generation after generation has dreamed about the ancient utopia with fertile land, a brilliant population, and every treasure imaginable. And they've wondered, could Atlantis be real?
Right now, on this shred of an island, archaeologists are slowly unearthing a city built by an ancient, advanced civilization and destroyed by a great catastrophe. Are they unearthing Atlantis?
I think the time has come for us to consider seriously the possibility that our much vaunted, advanced 20th century civilization is indeed a civilization of children with amnesia who have forgotten their own parents, because what would be recalled is almost too horrific to imagine.
Graham Hancock, former foreign correspondent for The Economist, is now devoted to proving that ours is not the first civilization to rise from the ashes of a global disaster, a theory that does not jive with mainstream science.
Anything before 3000 BC is considered to be almost irrelevant to who or what we are today. We are the apex, the pinnacle of creation. It's a very self-satisfied, self-satisfying view.
The accepted view is that there has been only one global cataclysm, the one that destroyed the dinosaurs. After that, humans developed slowly, taking millions of years to figure out how to make a spear. And then, seemingly overnight, we're building pyramids.
There doesn't appear to be this slow, gradual buildup of a civilization. The glory of ancient Egypt just suddenly appears almost completely intact.
Author David Hatcher Childress is a rogue archaeologist who specializes in the discovery of lost cities around the world.
John Anthony West, a well-known Egyptologist, has said that Egyptian culture is like a legacy from an earlier culture. Call it Atlantis or whatever we want, but the Egyptian culture came from somewhere else.
We like to put it within inverted quotes and call it the A word, because as soon as you mention this word, all kinds of scientists and scholars go absolutely ballistic.
Atlantis, a world that worshipped strange gods of science, a science gone berserk in the dread house of fear.
This is what happens when you repeat a 10,000-year-old story one time too many, says respected scientist Charles Pellegrino.
There's a lot of modern folklore about Atlantis that has arisen in the last 200 years or so, but if you want to look for the origins of the Atlantis legend, your only real written source close to the time that the kernel of truth behind the legend existed is back in the time of Plato. You have to go back to about 350 BC.
Plato's Atlantis has no death ray, weird science, or people who breathe underwater. His is a legend handed down from the Egyptians of an enchanted kingdom, the most advanced civilization on Earth, blessed with secret knowledge, strange and marvelous flora and fauna, precious metals, and peace. Atlantis was flourishing in 10,000 BC. And then, as Plato writes, in a single dreadful day and night, all her men were swallowed up by the earth, and the islands of Atlantis were similarly swallowed up by the sea and vanished.
Atlantis is a symbol. It's the classic Greek tragedy of something beautiful and something that had beauty and grace that vanished tragically in a single night.
But many researchers disagree with Pellegrino, insisting this is not a cautionary tale, but a true account of an actual civilization. Why else would Plato give specific dates and directions to Atlantis? 10,000 years ago, opposite the strait you call the Pillars of Hercules, there was a continent surrounded by a great sea. It's generally believed that the Pillars of Hercules are modern-day Gibraltar, gateway to the Atlantic, and that somewhere under that great ocean is the lost continent of Atlantis.
There's a great myth memory that haunts mankind of a lost civilization and a lost continent. But one of the problems that has scuppered the search for Atlantis, quote unquote, over the past 100 years or so, has been that there is apparently no lost continent under any of the oceans of the world.
But wait, some scholars say. In Plato's time, the Pillars of Hercules were not Gibraltar, but the pinnacle rocks of the Peloponnesus at the southern tip of Greece. And opposite that strait, there is a lost civilization under the sea.
Here in the Aegean, we have a story that is every bit as fascinating as the stories that are in our modern mythology about Atlantis, and actually even more fascinating because this is a story that is real.
The island of Thera today is actually the tip of a giant volcanic crater, and beneath these waters are the remains of an ancient civilization, almost identical to Plato's Atlantis, and one blasted into oblivion by a global cataclysm. Almost. Almost, because at least one of her cities did not sink completely. It is Akrotiri, and so far it has taken more than 20 years to uncover just one city block, buried under tons of volcanic ash.
It literally is a lost Atlantis. They were very advanced technologically. We're finding homes are just honeycombed with plumbing, hints of central heating, beautiful paintings that are found in every home, very different from the artwork that you find anywhere else in the world except in the tomb of King Tut.
But where is the treasure? The great inventions? Akrotiri is a ghost town, completely cleared out. Archaeologists have not found a single coin, comb, or bone anywhere in Akrotiri. The people here must have been warned by earthquakes or falling ash that the end was near.
It was the equivalent of about 120 hydrogen bombs all going off in the same place at the same time in roughly the space of a hiccup. It was the most powerful explosion that man has ever seen.
To say that Thera is Atlantis is too easy an answer. Many archaeologists want to try and explain Atlantis within the mundane theories of today's academia. They go looking for an island and they're looking for a cataclysm. And you don't have to go very far from Athens to find that.
Childress's biggest beef is time frame. Thera exploded in 1500 BC, not 10,500 BC as Plato states. But some researchers point out that's a difference of only one extra zero, which could have been easily added as the legend was passed down. So if the people, place, and date are right, this must be Atlantis.
There are sunken areas all over the world where there are cities to be found. There are more than 200 known sunken cities in the Mediterranean alone. That doesn't necessarily make them Atlantis.
Perhaps then there are two Atlantises. Plato's Atlantis, a fable based on a real Greek culture, and another Atlantis from our collective myth memory, a continent yet unfound.
And yet, we do have a continent on our planet which is truly lost, buried beneath the ice that now covers the Antarctic Peninsula. There, I suspect, we may find the cities, the great engineering works, the libraries of an entire advanced and forgotten human civilization.
What lies just beyond the shores of Akrotiri, where the people and their treasure-laden boats undoubtedly sank? We may never know. No one is allowed to dig, photograph, or even pleasure dive anywhere in the area. Why? Because the Greek government fears the discovery and piracy of their most ancient artifacts.
Next, is this newly discovered asteroid on a collision course with Earth?
If an asteroid were to hit, it would shut out much of the sunlight for months, maybe as long as a year.
Here are some of the stories Sightings is following in the news. Cold fusion was supposed to be the fuel of the future, clean, safe, efficient. It wasn't. So, a few rogue researchers, frustrated by the limits of modern science, began to look back for inspiration, all the way back to the mystical science of alchemy.
In Boulder, Colorado, researchers frustrated by the limitations of mainstream science are experimenting with the ancient art of alchemy. The very word conjures up images of the occult, of wizards and iconoclasts. But the basic premise of alchemy is simple. Use chemistry to transmute one object into another. While the original alchemists were trying to turn lead into gold, these New Age alchemists have loftier goals: to save planet Earth.
We, as a group of scientists around the world, are also trying to overcome the barrier that limits us from explaining the relationship between space-time and gravity.
Well, imagine a free energy planet where you didn't have to pay for your energy, where we could make anything from anything.
Ancient alchemists sought to transform objects by adding chemicals, incantations, and magic. In modern alchemy, scientists believe the trick is to subtract as much from the object as you can, and then reform it. It is the devolution of science.
We have taken water and made nitrogen and fluorine. We have taken nitrogen and made hydrogen. And most notably, a couple of years ago, we took nitrogen and made mass 5, which is a missing element in the nucleonic chart.
The new element has yet to be named and remains controversial. But the real purpose of the new alchemy is moving forward. Alternative sources of energy and new ways to recycle, or rather transform, toxic waste are now being developed in this Colorado lab.
We would have something, I think, within a year or 2 years at the most, that you could replace your carburetor with, stainless steel plate the insides of your engine, and drive off down the highway and have water vapor come out your exhaust and never have to go to a filling station again. We'd have something that would revolutionize the whole planet.
In Pasadena, California, JPL has just released images of the newest asteroid believed to be careening towards Earth. It's called 1997 AC-11, and the images were captured from Earth by the NASA tracking system cameras located atop Mount Haleakala in Hawaii. It is a member of a rare class of asteroids called Atens, of particular interest to scientists because they seem to gravitate toward planets. AC-11 was discovered in January 1997 and may cross Earth's path as many as 4 times a year. On a previous edition of Sightings, we reported that each year about 10,000 pounds of extraterrestrial debris hit Earth's atmosphere, burn up, and fall as dust. But it is believed that every million years or so, an enormous celestial body makes its way to Earth, crashes, and obliterates everything in its wake, as is thought to be the case for the dinosaurs.
And if either a comet or an asteroid were to hit, it would come down, crash into the ground, make a crater tens of miles across, and it would leave in the high stratosphere a pall of dark material that would shut out much of the sunlight for months, maybe as long as a year. And that would be a very, very serious thing. Might well result in mass starvation for millions, hundreds of millions, even billions of people.
The odds of such an asteroid hitting the Earth is a reassuring 1 in 20,000. And it's also comforting to know that AC-11 is not enormous. But it is 600 feet wide. And this is what happened when a similar-sized meteor hit the Arizona desert. A populated area would have fared much worse. Experts at NASA are monitoring 1997 AC-11, but still need more data to determine the real odds of its collision with Earth. In the meantime, you can track the planetary path of this asteroid and others through the NEAT website at this address.
We'll have more stories in the news next time. Now, here's what's coming up as Sightings continues.
She died just months after marrying a Civil War soldier. Now, 130 years later, she's back home.
It's very possible that he may have died from a broken heart and put himself in the line of fire just to be with her. Love can be that strong.
Among the oldest and grandest American homes still standing today are the Antebellum mansions south of the Mason-Dixon line. Among them, Avenal. It's a 160-year-old plantation house that has remained unchanged since it was built in 1836. A monument to the past, Avenal is also a very comfortable place to haunt if you happen to be a ghost.
Avenel is the South, a place where you can almost hear Confederate soldiers marching off to fight a losing battle, feel the loss of the families left behind, and if you're one of the lucky ones, you will see a wraith, the mysterious lady in white.
There is someone here, and I feel like whoever she is, she means no harm. She's here. She's just a part of Avenel.
Since it was built in 1836, Avenel has been a house of history. Robert E. Lee was a frequent guest, so was Edgar Allan Poe. It was a carefree life until William Burrell was gone, and his wife Frances, or Old Miss as she was known, was left to run the plantation.
She had 4 daughters. She had 50 servants plus. Everyone, of course, had their own lives to live. Everyone, on occasion, would be sick, hungry, giving birth. She had a lot to take care of.
For Susan Overstreet and so many others who come here today, Avenel is a unique slice of living history.
It's truly a place that lives inside of you.
Overstreet, Annette Allen, and Annette Peterson are restoring Avenel, drawn here by its historic legacy, kept here by the spirits inside.
We were having a committee meeting in the dining room. Within a minute, I could hear a noise. It was a noise I had not heard before. It was a swishing sound, a rustling sound, and it got louder and louder. I couldn't put my finger on what this noise was. And at that moment, we realized that was the rustle of a hoop skirt.
The unseen figure in the rustling hoop skirt also seemed to rock in empty chairs and turn down just-made beds. The women asked former resident Peggy Maupin if she'd seen things too.
Now you're going to ask me if I believe in ghosts. Yes, I believe in them because I've seen one. I saw the white lady.
Peggy Maupin knows Avenel. Her family lived there for 80 years. She was just a young girl when she saw the lady in white, but the memory is still with her.
She came on up that where the street is now. And when she got over across the street there was a big oak tree. She disappeared. And my mother turned and said, "Did any of you see what I've just seen?" Well, several of us said yes. Well, I always thought it was Miss Burrell just looking after the place.
Most people thought it was the ghost of Frances Burrell, but Old Miss was somber, careworn, not the kind of woman to float through Avenel in a white dress. So, Sightings asked psychic investigator Debbie Carvelli to investigate the home and determine the identity of the lady in white she claimed to make contact in the attic.
There definitely is a presence here. I think that there's a little bit of sadness, too, because of all of the hardships and the difficulties that they went through. But I definitely feel that there's that particular feeling here.
In this bedroom, Carvelli claimed to make contact again. She said she was seeing the ghost and hearing a name, Fan.
There's a woman's face. And there's crying, a lot of crying. I feel it's Fan. I do not think it's Ole Miss. She wants to get it back, but she knows it won't be in the same way. The family and the closeness and all a part of life. It was home. It was happy, even though there was some sorrow.
Fan was Fanny, William and Frances Burrell's third daughter. Many a disappointed suitor had lost his heart to the enchanting Southern belle, who was known as the flower of Avenel.
She was close to everyone, and I think she just must have had a wonderful personality that anyone could love.
At the height of the Civil War, soldiers knew Avenel as a refuge, a place to get a hot meal and try to win Fanny's heart. But that belonged to James Breckinridge, whom Fanny had known since childhood.
They got back together when they got a little older and just found out they had a lot in common, and just fell very deeply in love.
When James was called to war, the two married quickly. Fanny didn't see her husband again for many months until she joined him during a short furlough. It was the first and last time they would kiss as husband and wife.
Apparently, she contracted typhoid, came back to Avenel, and in August 1862, just months after she had married Captain Breckinridge, she died.
James was fighting a losing battle, when he heard the terrible news.
Captain Breckenridge, rather than to come back to a fallen country, South had lost and his bride had died, put himself before enemy fire and was killed.
It's very possible that he may have died from a broken heart and put himself in the line of fire just to be with her. Love is that way. It can be that strong.
Today, Fanny and James Breckenridge are together again, but in name only. James's body was never found, and so Fan's body was buried alone. But her spirit, many now believe, is still waiting for James before she will rest in peace.
Love is a very powerful emotion, and it can withstand all time.
So Fanny, who met her true love at Avenel, married at Avenel, and died at Avenel, may never stop wandering until she's reunited with the lost spirit of her beloved captain.
No one is certain when the White Lady of Avenel first appeared, but there is one clue that she may have been in the house from the very beginning. Avenel was named after a house in Sir Walter Scott's novel titled The Monastery, and that fictional Avenel had a ghost called the White Lady.
Next, the mysterious power of ley lines.
The whole Earth is surrounded by these invisible force field lines. Those are ley lines.
If you were to look at a map of all the different sacred places around the world, you would find that many of them are built along straight paths that sometimes circle the globe. Most scientists believe that these precise paths, called ley lines, are a striking but insignificant coincidence. Then there are others who believe that the placement of monuments along ley lines was a deliberate act by ancient mystics who could feel the Earth's secret energy.
Imagine that the whole Earth is surrounded by a spider web of subtle energy currents. They can't be seen, felt, tasted, but the whole Earth is surrounded by these invisible force field lines. Those are ley lines.
In 1921, photographer Alfred Watkins made a startling observation from atop a hill in Hertfordshire, England. The ancient mounds and monuments below him were perfectly aligned all the way to the horizon.
Suddenly, he had this image of fairy lines, he called them. When he saw cathedrals, churches, old stone monuments, wells that were on straight lines of alignment. And he began to say, well, look, if this is here and this is here, they line up. I wonder why. And out of that was born the idea that he called them ley lines.
Most scientists scoff at ley lines, but the fact that sacred sites worldwide do line up along invisible paths does strike some as more than coincidence.
People in earlier times and cultures were much more aware of these things than we are today. But intuitively, we are drawn like magnets to sacred places. People flock to places like Machu Picchu, Stonehenge, Avebury, Glastonbury, and they don't always know why. The electromagnetic fields that are there are actually stronger. They're sufficiently stronger that they elevate and change your brain waves, moving you into alpha and theta states that are associated with creativity and insight and spiritual revelation.
James Swan is an author and naturalist who believes in the power and reality of invisible Earth energy. He uses the ancient art of dowsing to detect and map ley lines.
There's a couple of ways to detect ley lines. The first of which is animal behavior. Animals gravitate towards ley lines. They love them. Deer tracks, rabbit tracks, migration paths of birds, that sort of thing. The second is that they can be sensed and felt. It's not a clairvoyant sort of psychic thing. It's actually physically felt in your body. What dowsing does is simply to amplify that experience of the subtle difference in crossing through this invisible current of energy.
After years of traveling the world, Swan and his colleagues are studying the power of ley lines in an urban setting. Seattle, Washington is the first city in modern history to map its ley lines. The project has been organized by the nonprofit GEO Group, which is attempting to bring the pulsing currents of Earth energy into the public consciousness.
It's possible then, if you begin to map out a city and you read the ley lines and you read the chi, it's possible to work with those things and incorporate them into design to begin to reduce violence and create a sense of creativity and spiritual inspiration within places.
What we're proposing to do here is the exact same thing that was done all over the world by ancient people of every civilization. They found special places on the earth, and then they used earth and stone to build places of power and sacredness for their culture, for their society.
Geo Group President Chuck Pettis used dowsing rods to locate what he believes are all of the ley lines in the Seattle area. He then consulted with artist Mike Sweeney to create what looks, at first glance, like mass transit gone awry.
It's a layout of the ley lines and the power centers in the Seattle area. The crystals indicate where the ley lines actually enter the earth, and that's where the power center is created.
The goal is to enhance the overall energy within the city of Seattle to make Seattle a better place to live, a more spiritual place to live, a more healthy place to live.
Spiritual monuments don't dot Seattle's ley lines, yet.
If we were in Scotland, Ireland, England, many ancient places, this place that we are standing by would have a stone circle, it would have a standing stone, it would have a mound, it would be a special place. But the city of Seattle has only been here for 100 years. So this is a virgin power center. What we need to do is create a space here, put in a standing stone, a seating area to make this place special.
So far, the Geo Group has a $5,000 city grant to begin to design what they hope will be the Stonehenges of America.
These power centers are special places on the body of the earth. So by building beautiful artworks on these special places, we're healing the earth. We're making the earth more healthy, which creates a sense of world peace and harmony.
The Seattle Ley Line project is ongoing, but two major obstacles are standing in the way. The organizers want to involve more artists and officials in other cities to expand the scope and influence of their ley line monuments. And as is the case with most public art programs, they need more funding.
Next, how to see into the future.
Divination has probably been around as long as humankind had some sort of idea that there was going to be a tomorrow.
In our continuing series of reports on the impact of the millennium, Sightings is finding a pattern. As the year 2000 approaches, almost everything old is new again. Through religion, meditation, psychics, and soothsayers, more and more people are searching for divine inspiration. And believe it or not, even tea leaves are back.
Divination has probably been around as long as humankind had some sort of idea that there was going to be a tomorrow.
Since the dawn of consciousness, humankind has looked for a way to predict the mysterious path divine forces have planned for us. And it is the most ancient methods of divination, says author, Wiccan practitioner, and diviner Trish Telesco, that will propel us safely into the next millennium.
We're coming up on a very important juncture in human history where we're looking back on 2,000 years of chronicled history. Some people are afraid, some people are expectant, some people are hopeful, and some people just don't know what to look forward to. So they're using divination as one way of hopefully exploring a little bit of what the future holds for them.
Diviners have always looked to natural forces for signs of the future. At first, these omens came from unexpected celestial events. Then, by charting what was already there with astrology. Soon there was graphology, numerology, palmistry, and tarot cards that would call upon the reader's psychic ability for divination.
There probably isn't anything on this planet or in the heavens that people haven't used at least once to try and figure out their future.
And the divination revival means new methods are being developed all the time. Coffee now replaces tea and tea leaves for psychic and diviner Jorianda Frey.
I use a cup of coffee as though it's a crystal ball. I'm able to pour half and half cream into the coffee, and from the bubbles, the steam, and the cream, I'm able to access a lot of information psychically.
She doesn't read the grounds, but rather it's the swirling pattern of images at the surface of the cup that inspire Jorian's psychic impressions.
For me, coffee divination is 100% accurate. Oh, and look at if. It's actually spelled out if in here. I see letters, faces, numbers, body parts, broken bones, spirits. I see scenery in the coffee. It's pretty fantastic. I had one woman, when I was reading her, I had said, well, I think you're sick, and as soon as we're done with this reading, I think you need to go right to the doctor's. Okay, now that was Sunday. She went to the doctor's Monday. They hospitalized her immediately. They did a triple bypass on her. It's just that sense that I'm able to help somebody. You know, it's a nice feeling.
Trish Telesco's research indicates that divining is as individual as the diviner.
A person who works with tools all the time might want to make a cast system out of nuts, bolts, nails, and other things that they personally relate to.
For herself, Trish has adapted the ancient method of throwing semi-precious stones for divination.
Each stone has a meaning based on what ancient people believed it could do for them by carrying it. A lot of crystals were carried as amulets, talismans, and charms to protect people from the evil eye or whatever. I adopted that as a meaning for the stone set, and then where the stone lands in conjunction to other stones helps amplify that meaning. So you kind of get a pattern that that represents what's going on now and moving towards the future.
Geraldine Saunders is a physiognomist who divines the future from the palm and the face. She is also a celebrated author who believes divination can not only predict, but sometimes change the inevitable.
I think it's important for people to know the future because then they can be prepared. That's the advantage of knowing about all these subjects. Because when you're forewarned, you can be forearmed.
Geraldine also uses astrology and numerology for divination, but it is the unique lines in each person's palm that show her the clearest path to future events.
Palmistry is a scientific art, like medicine. The reason palmistry really works is the fact that the universal intelligence has given you these lines when you're born. We are each issued a blueprint, and it's right here in our palm.
Geraldine believes that everyone can benefit personally from some form of divination, but she warns it will take a collective global effort to rechart the catastrophic future foretold by other diviners.
Nostradamus certainly had a lot of foresight in his predictions, but I think maybe with group consciousness, knowing that these things could happen, that we may be able to change that.
And, say divination practitioners, this group consciousness will come when more people begin to read the signs and take them seriously, no matter how unusual the method. There is a new millennium fast approaching, and diviners and psychics warn extra batteries and a gallon of drinking water just won't cut it anymore.
I think people should know that when, according to numerology, we'll be in a different numerical cycle and things will change practically overnight.
Another trend we're sensing at Sightings is that the closer we get to 2000, and that's just MM in Roman numerals, the more spiritual and innovative we become. Have you thought about how you will ring in the future and all those zeros? The millennium is coming, ready or not.
If you've had a paranormal experience or would like to comment on a story you have seen, please contact us at America Online at keyword sightings. Download images, sounds, and QuickTime clips from Sightings episodes. On the internet, access information about sightings and the paranormal at sci-fi.com/sightings. Sightings, UFOs, a new book from author Susan Michaels, drawn from the files of Sightings. Sightings, UFOs is a comprehensive survey of compelling UFO encounters. Was Washington, D.C. the object of extraterrestrial surveillance in 1952? Have our nuclear facilities been invaded by silent intruders? What really happens at 39,000 feet? Commercial pilots speak out. These are only a few of the stories contained in Sightings, UFOs from Fireside Books.
Until next time, remember, no mystery is closed to an open mind. For Sightings, I'm Tim White.
A 3-hour blast of superheroic adventure is coming your way. First up, an ancient Celtic warrior steps through time, sacrificing all those who oppose him. That is until Mantis makes the scene. Enter the dimension of power. Sci-Fi Channel next.